The Olympics, we think of it as the absolute peak of athletic performance, all summed up by that famous motto: faster, higher, stronger. We picture the 100-meter dash, gymnasts who defy gravity, and the perfect, splashless dive. But what if I told you that right alongside sprinting and swimming, the games once featured live pigeon shooting, a swimming obstacle course, and even poodle clipping? You think you know the Olympics, but the early games were a wild west of bizarre competitions that have since been banned, forgotten, or just quietly swept under the rug. The modern Olympics we watch today are a polished, multi-billion-dollar production. But when Baron Pierre de Coubertin brought the tradition back in 1896, his vision was more of a grand, idealistic experiment. And that experiment got really strange at the 1900 Paris Games. These weren't a standalone event, they were just one part of the massive 1900 World's Fair. The director of the fair, a man named Alfred Picard, even thought hosting ancient sports was an absurd anachronism. The result was 5 months of sprawling, chaotic, and often confusing events. Honestly, a lot of the competitors didn't even realize they were becoming Olympians. It was in this anything goes atmosphere that some of the weirdest events in sporting history were born. Today, we're counting down 5 sports so strange, you won't believe they ever handed out a gold medal for them. Sport 5 coming in at number 5 is a sport that's more than just a memory from a school field day. For 20 years, it was a legitimate, medal-worthy event that tested the raw, collective power of nations. I'm talking about tug-of-war. Yes, that classic test of brute force, where 2 teams grab a rope and pull for all they're worth, was an official Olympic sport from 1900 all the way to 1920. Believe it or not, it was even considered part of the track and field program. The rules were simple and brutal. An 8-man team had to haul their opponents over a mark on the ground. If neither team could manage it after 5 agonizing minutes, the judges would just declare a winner based on who had gained the most ground. This was not an event for the faint of heart. The teams were often made up of the strongest men around, usually police officers or military units who were used to working together under intense physical strain. The British teams, in particular, were powerhouses, often stacking their rosters with officers from various London police departments. They were a dominant force, taking home 2 golds and a silver over the years. But where there's raw power, there's raw controversy. The history of Olympic tug-of-war is full of disputes. At the 1904 Games in St. Louis, the United States won gold, silver, and bronze. But this was less a show of national strength and more a quirk of the rules that allowed different American athletic clubs to enter as separate teams. It later came out that the gold medal winning team from Milwaukee had brought in professional ringers from Chicago just for the event. The real drama, though, went down at the 1908 London Games. The American team lodged a formal protest against their British opponents from the Liverpool police. The issue? Their shoes. The British team showed up wearing what were described as enormous shoes, so heavy, it was with great effort they could lift their feet from the ground. The Americans claimed these heavy police boots had illegal spikes that anchored them to the ground. The protest was shot down. In response, the Liverpool police offered to pull the final match in their bare feet to prove a point, but the insulted Americans just withdrew from the competition entirely. With the US out, Great Britain swept the podium, with 3 different police teams taking gold, silver, and bronze. So why did this schoolyard staple get dropped? By the 1920s, the International Olympic Committee, IOC, wanted to make the games more professional. Tug-of-war had a big problem. It didn't have a single international governing body to standardize the rules. Plus, as the Olympics started chasing TV audiences and big sponsors, a gritty game of tug-of-war just didn't fit the sleek, modern image they were going for. It was seen as more of a playground activity than a world-class sport, and after 1920, it was gone for good. Sport 4 at number 4, we have a sport that brings to mind manicured lawns and leisurely summer afternoons, not the high-stakes pressure of the Olympics. Get ready to be underwhelmed by the athletic intensity of croquet. That's right, the gentle pastime of knocking wooden balls through little hoops was an official Olympic sport exactly once, at the chaotic Paris Games of 1900. It was described in the official report as a sport, with hardly any pretensions to athleticism, and its inclusion tells you everything you need to know about those early games. The competition took place at a fancy sporting club in Paris, but the organizers didn't seem too concerned with attracting international players. They scheduled the events over several weeks, which made it impossible for most foreigners to make the trip. As a result, of the 10 athletes who signed up, every single one was from France. The very first event was the doubles match. The French team of Gaston Ormoit and Georges Johan arrived ready for a battle of gentle mallet strokes, only to find no one. No other team showed up. They won the gold medal by default, a victory they achieved without hitting a single ball. The rest of the tournament went pretty much the same way, with France sweeping all the medals simply because no other country was there. But maybe the most telling detail about croquet's Olympic career was the crowd, or lack thereof. Reports from the time claim that only one ticket was sold for the entire event. The lone spectator was an English gentleman who had traveled all the way from Nice, presumably a die-hard croquet fan, to watch what turned out to be an all-French affair. Despite its lack of action and its single fan, the 1900 croquet event actually holds a major place in Olympic history. It was one of the very first sports to include female competitors. 3 French women, including Madame Brohy and Mademoiselle Onia, competed alongside the men, making them pioneers and some of the first female Olympians of the modern era. So why was croquet a one-and-done Olympic sport? The answer is pretty obvious. It was slow, it wasn't physically demanding, and it completely failed to capture the public's imagination. An American version called roque, played on a clay court, popped up at the 1904 Olympics, but it had the same problem: only Americans competed, and it was immediately dropped. The Olympic motto is faster, higher, stronger, and the sport where the main activity is a nice walk just couldn't keep its spot. Sport 3 for our number 3 spot, we're moving from the garden party to the dueling grounds. This next event feels like something from an old movie, a gentleman's contest of honor, but with a strange Olympic twist. Get ready for pistol dueling. Now, before you picture Olympians taking 10 paces and firing at each other, let's be clear, this was not a fight to the death. The Olympic-adjacent versions of dueling were much safer. Instead of a live opponent, marksmen would take aim at plaster mannequins dressed in fancy frock coats with a bullseye painted on the chest. The official, medal-awarding version appeared just once, at the 1912 Stockholm Olympics, under the name 30 meters dueling pistol. 42 shooters from 10 nations gathered to test their accuracy. The winner was a 20-year-old American phenom named Alfred Lane, who was so good he won both individual pistol events at those games. But while the official 1912 event used dummies, earlier demonstration versions of the sport were even more theatrical. At the unofficial 1906 intercalated games in Athens, competitors actually fired at each other using pistols loaded with harmless wax bullets. The duelists wore protective face masks and heavy clothing, but it was still risky. Ricocheting wax bullets were a real danger to the spectators watching the simulated combat. Ultimately, the whole idea of dueling, even a fake version, just didn't sit right with the Olympic ideal. The founder of the modern games, Baron Pierre de Coubertin, believed that sport should build character and even have a military quality to it. A sport that simulated combat fit perfectly into this older worldview. But the world was changing fast. The tensions in Europe were about to explode into World War I in the aftermath of such a brutal war. An Olympic event that simulated combat was seen as being in incredibly poor taste. The idea of awarding a gold medal for pretending to shoot someone felt deeply wrong, and pistol dueling was permanently removed from the Olympic program. It was a relic of a time when settling a dispute with a pistol was still within living memory. Sport 2. If you thought croquet was a weird fit for the Olympics, get ready for number 2. This event wasn't just non-athletic, it was just bizarre. Held as a supposed demonstration event during the chaotic 1900 Paris Games, we have the one and only appearance of poodle clipping. You heard me right. Poodle clipping at the Olympics. The story goes that in a park in Paris, an event was held where competitors, armed with shears and combs, battled to see who was the fastest dog groomer. Legend says a crowd of 6,000 people gathered to watch, which, if true, would make it one of the most popular events of the 1900 Games. According to the tale, 128 groomers were given a 2-hour time limit. The goal wasn't about style or achieving the perfect haircut. This was purely a race. The winner was simply the person who could shear the most poodles in 2 hours. You have to wonder, were the poodles all the same size? Were they all well behaved, or did some people have to wrestle with their dogs? The logistics are mind-boggling. The gold medal in this story was supposedly awarded to a French farmer's wife named Avril Lafoule. She allegedly clipped a whopping 17 poodles in 2 hours, which is just over 7 minutes per dog. Now, this is where we need to take a huge grain of salt. The story of Olympic poodle clipping is so perfectly absurd that many have questioned if it ever happened. The biggest clue is the winner's name, Avril Lafoule. If you say it with a French accent, it sounds suspiciously like April Fool. Many historians now believe the whole story was an elaborate April Fool's Day joke from a 2008 newspaper column that has since taken on a life of its own online. But the fact that this story is even believable tells you everything about the 1900 Paris Olympics. They were so disorganized and so loosely defined that an official poodle clipping contest doesn't even sound that far-fetched. The games were tangled up with the World's Fair and featured events like firefighting, kite flying, and hot air ballooning. So, did it actually happen? The official record is silent, and the IOC certainly doesn't recognize it. But whether it's real or a brilliant hoax, the legend of Olympic poodle clipping is the perfect symbol of the glorious chaos of the early games. Sport 1. We've arrived at number 1. We've had a schoolyard game, a garden party pastime, a fake duel, and a dog grooming contest. But our top spot goes to an event that isn't just unusual, it's genuinely shocking. This is the only time in Olympic history where animals were deliberately killed as part of the competition. Taking the number 1 spot is live pigeon shooting. This was not a simulation. At the 1900 Paris Games, competitors loaded shotguns with live ammo and took aim at living birds. The event was exactly as brutal as it sounds. Pigeons were released, and the goal was simple: shoot and kill as many as you could. If a shooter missed 2 birds in a row, they were out. The scene must have been ghastly. Imagine the crack of shotguns, followed not by the shatter of a clay disc, but by the fall of a dead or wounded animal. Over the course of the event, more than 300 pigeons were killed. The ground was reportedly littered with dead birds, blood, and feathers, a gruesome backdrop for an athletic competition. The gold medal in this bloody affair went to a Belgian marksman named Leon de London. He successfully shot 21 pigeons in a row to claim his victory and his place in Olympic infamy. The IOC has since tried to distance itself from this event, barely acknowledging it and often claiming it was an unofficial part of the World's Fair. But at the time, it was very much on the program, and medals were awarded. Unsurprisingly, the sport was a one and done. The sheer animal cruelty was too much, even for the sensibilities of the early 20th century. Public disgust ensured that live targets would never again be used in the Olympics. However, the event did leave one lasting legacy. It was the direct ancestor of modern Olympic skeet and trap shooting. The term clay pigeon itself is a holdover from this era. When the live bird event was banned, shooters switched to clay discs as their new targets, but the name stuck. So, every time you watch an Olympic shooter yell, "pull," and blast a clay target out of the sky, you're witnessing the sanitized, humane evolution of what began as one of the cruelest and most bizarre events in sporting history. From the brute force of tug-of-war to the shocking cruelty of live pigeon shooting, the early Olympics were a world away from the spectacle we know today. They were chaotic, experimental, and the perfect reflection of their time. The disappearance of these sports shows how the Olympics evolved, from a quirky sideshow at the World's Fair to the most prestigious sporting event on the planet. But the evolution never stops. While poodle clipping is probably not making a comeback, the Olympic program is always changing. And in a cool echo of the past, the upcoming LA 2028 Games will see the return of two sports that had their own brief moment in the early Olympic sun: cricket, last seen in 1900, and lacrosse, a medal event back in 1904 and 1908. They'll be joined by brand new sports like flag football and squash, proving that the Olympic spirit of experimentation is, in its own way, still alive. It just shows that the story of the Olympics is always being written, with new chapters being added and old, strange ones left behind in the history books. So, I have to ask you, if you could bring back one of these discontinued sports, which would it be? Would you tune in for the strategic battles of Olympic tug-of-war? The leisurely pace of croquet? Or the sheer absurdity of poodle clipping? Let us know your pick in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this trip into the weird side of sports history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories you thought you knew. Thanks for watching.